On today's episode, we're sitting down with the Executive Director of PSI herself, Dr. Wendy Davis. We had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Wendy to hear how perinatal mental health disorders have touched her life personally and professionally, and she even indulged us by sticking around for a fun round of questions at the end of the episode. We are so honored to close out Maternal Mental Health Month with this story of one grateful survivor who lives and breathes the work of supporting parents and professionals every single day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the I Am One podcast are the speaker's own. Tuning into this podcast is not a replacement for therapy or any other form of professional help. Our discussions cover personal stories of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and may feel triggering to some listeners. Your number one priority is to take care of yourself. So if you are in need of help, please reach out to the PSI helpline by calling or texting HELP to 1-800-944-4773 for help in English and in Spanish. At PSI, we want you to know you are not alone, you are not to blame, and with help, you will be well. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Dr. Wendy Davis, welcome to the podcast studio. We are so happy to chat with you today, right smack dab in the middle of Maternal Mental Health Month. And we are also about a month and a half out from PSI's annual conference in Kansas City this year, in case anybody else is counting down like me. It's a very, very busy time for everyone here at PSI, so we are very honored to have a slice of your time today to chat all things perinatal mental health related, and maybe even get to some fun, quick fire questions at the end if time permits. All that to say, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me here. There is no other place I'd rather be right now. This is it. This is exactly how I want to spend this time today. And I'm really, really excited about this podcast in general and about just the great stories you're telling here. So thank you.
Thanks for letting us do a pod, Wendy.
Thanks for saying yes.
Thank you for saying yes. I love it. Thank you.
Well, if we are ready to jump in, Wendy, I just have to say, you know quite a few people, but in case any of our listeners do not know you,
That would be weird.
that would be, well, it's true though. I mean, some people don't know Wendy.
It could happen.
It's a small percentage of the population on this earth, but would you please give us a little introduction to who you are?
Absolutely. So I am Wendy Davis. I live in Portland, Oregon, USA. I'm the executive director of Postpartum Support International. I am the mom of two children, two beautiful babies who are 25 and 28. In my mind's eye, they're still my babies. And I am married to a wonderful man. I have a beautiful cat, and I have a big family. I'm the fourth child out of five in my original family and the seventh out of nine in my Star Trek. Seventh out of nine in my step family.
4 minutes in, we've touched on Star Trek already.
Jerry Ryan, call us.
I am the real 7 of 9. For those, that's a character in Star Trek.
Oh, Danny did need that explanation.
Thank you.
I am used to a big family, and that's put me, kind of prepared me to be part of this big family of perinatal mental health community support. And that's also part of who I am.
Well, Wendy, could you share with us, if you don't mind, what role have perinatal mood and anxiety disorders had on your life personally?
Well, my original career is as a psychotherapist. And I'm that person, I'm that kid who just loved stories, loved to listen to people. And I never really thought about what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just knew I was drawn to people who helped people with their feelings. And I was born with a lot of sensitivity and empathy, and I'm an introvert, so I love to listen. So it was natural for me to become a therapist. And in that therapy training, I went to college, I went to graduate school, I have a PhD in psychology, And in none of that did I ever learn about perinatal mental health or any of it, postpartum depression. It was not taught, it was not mentioned, it wasn't a thing that anyone was teaching or learning about. So I went into my career without that as a specialty because it didn't exist. And I was a specialist in depression and anxiety. I worked with lots of different people. I worked with lots of parents. I actually first specialized in not just depression, anxiety, but also creative process. That was my thing. And that's what I studied in graduate school, creativity and performance, as well as just long term mental health and wellness, right? And so I became a parent after I'd been a therapist for at least 10 years and got a crash course in postpartum depression and anxiety. And this is the thing that's so compelling that changed my life is that despite being a specialist in depression and anxiety, despite the fact that I had dealt with it before myself personally, but also I and people in the helping professions would understand this. I like working with people with depression and anxiety, panic attacks, and I like it because I always know that you can get better and that counseling and therapy and peer support, rather than being like a downer, as some people think, like, how can you do that? You're hearing all these tough stories. It's where people bloom. So it's amazing to work with people and bring people through that as I was brought through to be. I can be okay. I can learn how to not be identified as this anxious person or this person who's sick or will never get well. So I already had that mindset. When I had postpartum depression and anxiety, despite all of that, I did not recognize that I was depressed. I didn't. It wasn't just that I was trying to deny it or hide it. This is what's compelling, and this is what changed my life. Is despite being a specialist, I didn't recognize the symptoms were symptoms of this thing I treated all the time and help people with. I thought I was failing. Just didn't know I was depressed. I thought these are signs of making a big mistake. These are signs of just not being able to be a parent. I'm not in the club. I'm so embarrassed that I decided to have a child and I failed. And I was so embarrassed, and the symptoms of depression and anxiety are literally that you blame yourself, you withdraw, you have no energy, you're helpless and hopeless. And so I didn't tell anybody. I mean, I didn't tell my husband, and I'm a therapist. Like, let's talk about it. I didn't tell him. And you know what happens when you're depressed and anxious and you withdraw and don't talk about it and don't eat and don't sleep because insomnia and no appetite, you get worse. So, how it's impacted my life is that as soon as I could start reading again, because that took me a while, I just turned my career around and started to teach and train and support and develop support groups so that nobody has to suffer in that despair and fear that I did. If I didn't know and I know the symptoms, then how hard is that for people who have no idea what's going on? That this is especially perinatal mental health distress and disorders are temporary, treatable, and common. And it's just essential that people know it. So I've devoted the rest of my life to that.
What did it look like for you to seek help? How did you get better? How did you get well?
Seeking help was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I've done a lot of hard things. And in retrospect, it always seems, how could that be? It's just literally just asking for help. But in the moment, in that crisis, and I know I've just talked to thousands of people since then who experience this, it's really that you feel like you're gonna break or break them. That stigma and embarrassment is kind of generally always there, but when you're in that state of depression and anxiety, reaching out for help feels like you're just telling everyone that you have failed. And what's happening is at that same time, I know this now, your instincts to love and care for the baby actually are there. So I think that part of what happens is that if I reach out for help, everyone will know this baby isn't safe. So everything I thought, by the way, about that was wrong. And I did find a way to reach out. And in retrospect, I can look at the pictures, at the journal entries, at other people's words about me and see I was so bonded with this baby. I love this baby. But when you're depressed, the symptom of depression is to have flat feelings. So there was a moment, and I remember these moments as if they were yesterday in my mind's eye. Know exactly where I was standing in my house, staring at the phone, trying to decide whether to call for help. And I remember that, and I remember thinking, I just can't tell anybody because the reason I feel like this is that I made a mistake and I shouldn't be a mom. And I just don't know what's going to happen if I tell. And in that moment, I realized, oh, wait, no, 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 no. What I'm feeling are the results of something, not the cause of something. As soon as I turned it around, I thought that I felt the way I did because I didn't love my baby and shouldn't be a mom. So I thought that the cause was that I was broken as a mom and that I didn't love him and I didn't love it. And so I was thinking about ways to disappear and all that. And in that moment, I know just where I was, where I went, wait, wait, wait. No, the cause of what I'm feeling is depression. And the symptoms are not me. That's not my identity. How did I know that? I had no one to tell me that. I had no Danny or Emily or Wendy to say that to me. I am so grateful that what part of my brain, psyche, memory went, wait, wait, this is what's happening. And so when that turned around, I could start to reach out. The real pragmatic answer to how did I get help is I had a relentless friend, hi Jane, who said, "You're not right. You're struggling." I'm like, "Oh, can you tell?" And she said, "You have to call someone." She was at the birth. She was such a sister and companion through all that. And she saw me going downhill and doing things like when the baby was comforted by her, I just felt sinking like, oh, he loves everyone else. And she said, let me come over. I can sleep with him at night and get you some rest. And I thought, how can she do that? How can she have a baby there and not have insomnia and panic? And she just said, you have to call someone. Well, who was I going to call? So there were no resources. But Jane was relentless. Jane was going out of the country. And she said, you've got to call someone before I leave. So she said, call a doula, a postpartum doula. I thought, well, that's for rich women. I don't need a
It wasn't a
doula.
common thing. What year was it? What year are we in?
1994.
Okay. Oh,
Well, I
okay.
live in Portland, Oregon, so it was
Like
more common than other
land of
places. We
doulas.
had
Yeah.
doulas, but I
Yeah.
thought they were just a luxury. And I didn't need a doula. I needed like a personality change. I still didn't really understand what was happening.
Your brain was
So,
telling you
yeah.
lies and you were believing them
Yes,
about
but Jane
yourself.
Jane wouldn't let up.
Good job, Jane.
Yeah, thanks, Jane.
Shout out, Jane.
Then I called a bunch of doulas, and I didn't call my midwife because I didn't want her to know I was failing. I didn't call my mom because I did want her to know. So I just kept calling doulas and I heard their voices and I never matched, and then I'm going to cry again. Then I
Okay.
called one doula who just sounded so like she answered the phone,
Oh, that's a good start.
Vicky. She was so straightforward. She was so matter of fact. She was so street smart. And this is what Vicky York asked me that day. No one had asked me this. This was about 6 weeks postpartum. I had lost all my weight. I wasn't eating or sleeping. I was crying. I was going downhill. I was breastfeeding and
Oh,
taking really
wow.
good care of that baby, but I didn't know it. I was going down. And so Vicky York said to me, "Yeah, I can come help you. Have you been depressed or anxious?" That was it. No one had asked me. I didn't even recognize what was happening really fully until she asked me this. And I just started to cry, and I cried for 3 days straight. She came over the next morning and she sat and listened to me for hours. I found out later That was probably the longest Vicky York ever sat still in her life.
in your
She was a
in your
perfect
living room.
doula. She was always moving. She told me later, she didn't know anything about postpartum depression. She just had started to hear a little about it. And so she never tried to know more than she knew. She just came and listened and she said to me, I think you might have postpartum depression. And I'm going to leave you these articles and I want you to have me come back tomorrow. And I said, tomorrow? Like I don't need that kind of help. Risk factor for postpartum mood disorders is I don't need anybody. So even while I'm asking, I'm just still trying to undo the help, right? Is that
Yeah.
familiar? Vicky said,
No.
Vicky
I know
said
what
this
you're talking
magic
about.
thing, which is like, listen, you're going to be better. Listen to
Mm.
this, what she said. In 3 weeks, 3 months, you're not going to need me here. You need me now. Have me come over. You're going to get better faster if you have help around the house, help with the baby, and just have someone to listen to you. You need me now. And just hearing that, listen to what she did, told me not only helped me give a name to what I was going through, gave me some resources, but said, you're going to get better and you're not going to need me over here. Right now, you really need me. And that was the beginning. I did call a support group. There was one in town and it was not a good fit, and that's how I started to get help. What I learned is the most important thing for me was to let people in and to really start to give myself some compassion and grace. What everything we pour into PSI now really has come out of all of our lived experience, but from the origin, from me knowing what people need is not fancy clinical intervention. People need whatever they need. They might need medication, therapy, group support, a doula, exercise, food. They might need any of these things. But in our core self, what we need, no matter what else of those things we do, what I needed was someone to say, I got you. I see you. I see you in there. You're going to get better. A lot of people go through this. And have things I can do to help you. So, what do you want to do today? I can fold laundry. I can hold the baby while you take a shower. Why don't you take a walk with your husband? And once I had that help, then I could start to really talk to my husband, my sister, and my mom. And the important part, and that I say this all the time to people who contact PSI, is to remember that all you really need to do when you're suffering is take that one step. And then there's a boatload of people to help you take the rest.
Well, I feel motivated right now.
Yeah, I
Like,
think that's really important. Just the fact, having somebody say, how about you do this? Or what about this? I can help you with this. And then all you have to do is say, okay. Sometimes it's hard to think of that one thing on your own, but for somebody to suggest it, and all you have to do is say, okay, and just go for it, then.
Because when you're depressed, there is no one first step. That's the issue. That your helper has to be able to say, here, take my hand, like that escalator in the airport. Like, I'll get on
Oh,
that escalator with you. I'll hold you until you feel steady. But it's right here. It's right here. So when you think about getting better and you think of all the ways that you're failing because you're depressed, or you might die because you're anxious, and then the baby cries, or you can't figure out how to eat, and all your friends say stupid things, and you don't know there's a step to wellness. You just think there's more steps to being broken. You have to have someone who has faith. And one of the things my husband said at that in that time was in the middle of the night because I was crying and woke him up. I didn't wake him up because I'm an overachiever. The crying woke him up, and
oh.
he said, and he said, you need two things you don't have right now: time and confidence. And you will have both. And I see you in there. I didn't understand the other part about getting well is changing what I was doing in the day and then the night. I thought I just had to be with that baby all the time. So all the things I had done for years to be well, self-care as we call it.
Out the window, right? Because your job is to do all the things to keep this little blob alive, right? And then
And
we forget about ourselves.
and you get sick.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I was mad. I was so mad at him. Like, oh yeah, you go to yoga and you took a walk after work, business as usual. And I was so mad. And he said, "But why don't you do that then?" Well, what am I going to do? Ask you to come home at 5:30 3 times a week? Yeah. Uh huh. That's what you're going to
Yeah.
do.
Well, when you put it like that.
So time and confidence, and I did not have those things at that moment. And you have to have someone outside you to have that faith in you to say, it can see you and look at how you are with that baby. You're so connected. You're really listening to him. So the person who's depressed can't see it, and I couldn't.
Hard to see in the moment. You don't see it.
Yeah, it is the hardest thing.
To not believe that it's a character flaw and to kind of have that ability to reframe. At the conference last year, Wendy and Dr. Kat did a really cool session about sometimes we think, what's wrong with me? Instead of saying, like, what's going on for me? Like, what's happening for me right now? And it's hard in that
Yeah.
moment to think of that. I certainly didn't.
Right. And that's true for most of us who've gone through it. And I think that when you think about what I learned inside and by now helping other people, is that it really is a combination of physical, hormonal changes and other stressors, social, like being isolated, not understanding that moms are supposed to have help, for example, and just trying to do it all by yourself and having society either tell you you're doing it wrong because you're not like the social media image, or for lots of people not having the resources, or encountering any kind of discrimination, racism, you know, not being able to get help. So those are social stressors. But there's also this psychological part. It is not the cause, but it's a risk factor for people who are used to being really self sufficient, really strong, perfectionists, and criticize themselves first before they look outside. Yes. Hello, people raising hands.
Hello.
For those who are listening, raise your hand. Go
Raise your
ahead.
hand.
Because
And
everybody
then
else
listen
is.
listen to this part, which is, if we first learn how to say what you said, Danny, is not, don't ask what's wrong with me, ask what's going on for me. And would I think like this about my best friend, my best sister? Or would I say, God, she's really going through something? And what happens is depression and anxiety, and this is the piece that I needed to understand. And I always am trying to help other people understand. So you have all that going on kind of as a self critical person. Depression itself creates an additional lack of serotonin induced view of yourself in the world. It's not just that you're a perfectionist, you're also, your brain chemistry, your hormones are seeing the world through a filter that says nothing's going to work. It's a symptom, it's not a fact. Nothing's going to work, and most of all, I'm not going to work. And so that's the piece. It's that, that's what makes it hard to see. It's almost that someone has tied a weight onto your ankles but didn't tell you, and you're like, what is wrong with me? Well, we got to get that weight off your ankles. We got to get the chemistry right too, so that you can see, well, after you take that one step, oh, this isn't me as a parent, this is me as a parent with depression and anxiety. That's temporary. We lose women all the time. And I'm so grateful to have survived, because we think this is me now and I shouldn't be here and the baby would be better off. And we just have, everyone needs to know, oh, no, no, this is temporary treatable. And you're seeing the world through those crap colored glasses.
I like it. It's the opposite of rose colored glasses. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. What are some other misconceptions that people have? Like, set the record straight for us.
About perinatal mental health.
Yes.
Well, According to the comments on the internet that none of us should ever read, people think that,
Unless you're on our website.
yes, in a safe place, please do read the comments. Thank you, Danny.
Right. Read our comments, not those comments. Yeah.
I think the biggest misconception is about not understanding mental health and the effects of symptoms of mood and anxiety disorders and psychosis and all of it and trauma. And that is that people misunderstand and think that it's a choice to feel bad, or that people have said the darndest things to me, even when they knew I was starting a mom to mom support group here in Portland called Baby Blues Connection. And I had people say to me things like, "Oh, that's so great you're doing that. By the time I had my babies, I had waited so long. I love them so much. I didn't have time for depression." So it's almost like thinking it's a choice or a mood, an opinion. I've had people say to me at the end of a training of nurses, somebody said, "Well, okay, I hear what you're saying and all, but isn't it just really basically that she was lazy to begin with?" I had just given the training and talked about that I had just gone through this. And then on the other hand, the really lethal misconception is thinking that it doesn't get better, honestly.
Right.
And every perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, including bipolar disorders and psychosis, are temporary and treatable. You have to have the connections, you have to have the resources and the people around you to remind you if you hit a rough spot, or especially when you're in the beginning of it. Those are the top two misconceptions. I think the biggest misconception that parents themselves go through when they're pregnant or postpartum and they're having these symptoms is that they cause them themselves, as I said before. I think that's really one of the biggest misconceptions, is it's their fault, it's not common, and it won't get better.
And then you attribute it to all the other things.
Yeah.
Like because you did it to yourself, right? In this narrative, this like incorrect narrative. Yeah. Like for me, I'm thinking about the birth of my first and all of my feelings around that experience were what I attributed to how I was feeling.
That's right.
Instead of maybe you're depressed, Emily. Like it's
That's right.
laughable in hindsight because it was so clear from here to see that. But there you can't see anything because you got crap glasses on.
We're used to thinking, "Oh, I feel bad. Did something happen? What happened? Oh, I just gave birth. Oh, it's because I didn't like how the birth went." Now, there are lots of times that you are literally having trauma responses to birth or to previous trauma or to trauma going on right now. And that's its own thing that we need to understand is happening. But what we aren't used to thinking, and the pandemic has kind of taught us a bit, is that, depression, anxiety, these are real symptoms that can be helped. And you're right. Just what you said, Emily, is that you think, "Oh, I know it's because of birth." And then you expect it to kind of get better if you're someone who knows how to, like you've gotten through a lot of things. Okay, I'll feel better soon. But with a perinatal depression, if you're not getting treatment and help, which could even just be a community of support, honestly, you feel worse. And that's because you never have that key remedy, that key ingredient, which is I am a person that was vulnerable to this, and I'm going through something temporary and treatable, and I'm part of a community of people that goes through this, and I'm going to get better. Instead of like, I am so broken, everyone else seems to be happy. Everyone else seems to be able to do this. What's wrong with me? I better just lie in bed and think about all the different ways that I'm failing and have
Yeah.
ever failed in my life. And so we need other people. I can tell you this, that the biggest change between my first and second baby was just really allowing myself to be in a world where other people could come in and give me a hand, and to understand that there's, as Bertie Meyer says, seasons of giving and seasons of receiving. And then as I read and listened and understood, every traditional healthy society, including any other mammals, have other sisters, aunties, or males helping the birthing person. Mommies and babies are not left alone.
Gotta have that
And
community.
you have, so I had to learn to let that in and realize that's a strength, not a failure. And I said to myself, walking down the street one day with a stroller out loud, stop in the middle of the sidewalk, Wendy Davis, if you were meant to do everything by yourself, you would not have been born on a planet with other people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Just get with it. And so the biggest change I made was letting people in and also working on my physical health and some prevention methods for number 2. I had the doula lined up, I had food lined up, I was ready to feel and talk and do whatever I needed. And I did not have postpartum depression anxiety after number 2. And I sat in that rocking chair and I cried every day out of gratitude. Same rocking chair that I cried in out of despair. And I just thought, this is what it feels like. I'm just supposed to be, exhausted and tired and need to take breaks, but not have that sinking, horrible feeling in my chest, in my uterus, in my body that I was failing. And so that's what we do at PSI now is just really try to spread that word that you're part of something. We're here. We got you. Let us help you along so that you can find yourself again, and you will.
You helped start a support group in Portland, and
I did.
then how did you start getting involved with PSI?
Well, I do like to tell this story because it's just remarkable how life happens. In the middle of my postpartum recovery, and I was still on maternity leave from my counseling practice, I got a call from an old client who said, "Hey, I know we haven't talked in years. I'm starting a group for postpartum depression, and I want it to be peer support, groups and telephone support. And I've researched all over the world and I found the other ones. There were 5." And she said, "I'm going to call it Baby Blues Connection." She was a musician. "Will you help me? Because I need a therapist who can help me assess safety and just be a clinical advisor." And I was still in the middle of it when I knew this client. I didn't have kids and I wasn't planning to, by the way. And I helped her through postpartum depression without knowing what it was, and I wish I had known. I would have been more helpful. I really would have.
Take the training, people. That's your call to action right
It
now.
is. I thought I was doing great with depression, anxiety. I did not help her with the deepest feelings because I did not know how to say these things. So here she calls me out of the blue, so to speak, and I just stared at the phone and I said, "This is so remarkable because, well, first of all, yes, I'll help you. And I'm going through it right now. Isn't that
What a
amazing?"
coincidence. It's
And she was
incredible.
this very spiritual person. She goes, "That doesn't surprise me at all." So I started helping her. And then she moved out of state. And she asked me, "Do you know anyone who could take this on?" Well, I didn't. And I thought, well, that's bad. I have a 8-month-old baby. I'm just getting out of postpartum depression now. It would be unwise. I'm starting my practice. It would be unwise for me to take this on. And so I couldn't, no one else would have, no other therapist I knew would have done it for free as I was doing it. And so I was just going to say no. And honestly, I was staring out the window of my house one day and I saw a woman walking down that same street with a stroller and walked into the community center where I had just put up bulletin board flyers back in the day
Oh,
for
yeah.
Baby Blues Connection with the tear off tabs. And I saw her walk in there and I thought she's going to get to that and she's going to pull that tab and she's going to call it and it's going to say, "This number has been disconnected." And I said, "I can't do that." So I said yes. And then I was the founding director of Baby Blues Connection and started training other moms going through it to be the peer supporters. And when I got pregnant at the end of the second pregnancy, I passed the torch to them. In that time though, I was continued to research those 5 groups in the world that were doing peer support for perinatal mental health, and PSI was the one. I called Jane Honickman. I became a support coordinator in Oregon and Idaho. We only had about 12 support coordinators. Now
Wow.
PSI has over 1,000 volunteers. And I started as a volunteer with PSI while I was doing Baby Blues Connection. And I learned so much about peer support. about the immediacy of that, about how much we need that from both Baby Blues Connection and PSI and the other groups that we have collaborated with since then. So volunteer, and then I was on the board for a while, and then I was hired as the first executive director, and that was 2009. Until then, everything except for the office at PSI was done by all volunteers. We've grown a lot.
Can I tell you something? I called the helpline in 2008. My blue phone rang. Anyone who went to college in the early 2000s, those
Was it like a
see-through
Nokia?
plastic blue phones?
Oh.
Yeah. No, like
With a cord?
the kind that has to charge on a base,
Oh,
Danny.
okay.
Jeez.
Sorry. A VTech?
Yep, it's the VTech.
I think I had a green one.
Nice. Yeah, you would have picked the green one.
I
That
would
makes
have,
sense. Before we go to the lightning round, let's assume the whole planet is listening right now.
yeah. Zero pressure.
It's Maternal Mental Health Month this month. Next month, there's, Paternal Mental Health. What should people be doing?
First of all, drink your water and get fresh air. Okay. Secondly, raising awareness is the most important thing we can do. And think back to what has helped you in a crisis, but also think back to the stories that the three of us are telling. It's not fancy. It's really more that to say to your friend, sister, colleague, client, how are you doing emotionally? And give them time to answer. Ask, is this what you expected? And then be ready to say, you know what? We're all talking about this now. Everyone knows now this is really common, really common. And people have been afraid to talk about it. So the call to action for anybody is just make it be part of our conversation. And I do feel like the pandemic can help us with that if we don't hide back in our holes and try to pretend that everything's just fine, fine, fine. Thank you, Alanis. But to kind of really understand that the more you make emotional and mental health part of your conversation, the better it's going to be for everyone. What if everyone did that? What if everyone did that on Capitol Hill? Hey, dude, how are you doing emotionally today? You want to talk? Maybe we would have healthier policies and programs. Maybe we'd have less ridiculous conversations going on. And so in our own houses, don't be afraid to ask, how are you doing emotionally and how can I help you today? That's the first step. Then the call to action for people who might be going through this or at risk, visit the website, postpartum.net. Call or text us anytime, English or Spanish. And I know you give out that number all the time, so I'm going to do it again, 800-944-4773, 9444-PPD. Call, text, English and Spanish. And here is the key. You don't need to have a diagnosis to contact us. You don't need to know what's going on. Had I had that number to call, had my client who started Baby Blues Connection, who I felt I didn't really help, had that number, she would have called in the middle of the night to say, I'm having trouble. I'm having scary thoughts, and I don't know what this is. But people don't realize that we have thousands of volunteers in PSI, and every single one of them is trained and supported to say, we got you. I'm here to listen. It's free, confidential, and informed and respectful, and helps you take that next step. So the call to action is, if you're a helper, whether that's family or friends, to just lean in a little bit and to not be afraid to say, how are we doing? If you're a helper, let's say, for example, a dad or partner, and you think you're not allowed to have your own stuff, scratch that. Come to the website and look up for partners and dads, and realize, as y'all have mentioned, there's research, real research, that says at least 1 in 10 dads gets also depressed or anxious after the baby comes. Don't argue with me about whether that's postpartum or not, or whether dads are allowed. Of course they are. And if you want to get involved as a volunteer or a supporter, oh, we're here for that too.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is how we've grown. So all I say to people is just go to postpartum.net, check it out, look around, join a climb near you. email us. Let us know what you want to know. Follow us on social media.
Lightning round.
Or as we like to call it, the molasses round, because it's not very fast.
It's not fast.
But we can go faster.
Love
Okay.
it.
Question number 1. Besides this podcast, what's your favorite podcast if you listen to podcasts?
I do. And my
Ooh.
favorite podcast is Smartless.
Ooh.
It really is. And I just enjoy listening to them. It has nothing to do with maternal mental health, maybe a little bit with paternal
Mm,
mental health, but I listen to it very regularly.
great. Do you prefer a book in your hand or a book in your ear?
Wendy, do you read?
Do you read books, Wendy?
I think a book in my hand. I prefer a book in my hand, actually.
Reading anything especially noteworthy or that you would recommend? Doesn't have to be peer reviewed.
I have a
Just
surprising answer to that.
okay.
The book I'm reading right now is an amazing thing. It's called Memories from Mops. And what that is that my mom's name in our family is Mops. And last year on her birthday, or 2 years ago, we got her one of those presents where it's a story.
Like she writes memories. She takes some time to write.
You get a story prompt
Yeah.
every month. And in response to that prompt, you write a little essay and you send it in. And at the end of the time, however long you want to take, they you can turn it into a book.
Oh my
So the
goodness.
book I'm reading is not public, but it's my mom's memories one at a
I
time. She
love
wrote it,
that.
then you add pictures, and it's a really beautiful thing. That's my book.
What is your go-to for a quick mental break?
Going outside, taking a walk.
Oh yeah. It's nice this week in the Pacific Northwest. I just did that this morning. I heard it's supposed to be 90 in Portland though.
Yeah, and however, Danny and I know because we both live in the Pacific Northwest, you can't wait for sunshine to take a
Oh
walk.
yeah.
You have to have your galoshes and sometimes umbrellas and not feel like a nerd taking your walk with an umbrella. But that's the analogy. That's it. Like there are things that you have to do to stay well and get well, and you would prefer a sunny day. But hey, if it's raining, there's still things to do.
Just have the
And
gear.
so,
Get out there.
yeah, exactly.
That's what we have to do.
Being outside.
Yeah. What is your best parenting hack?
Oh, easy. No,
Okay.
totally easy.
Okay.
I always dressed my babies in the clothes for the next day. I mean,
Oh,
there's the same clothes, pajamas. They all have the loose, all like how we've dressed through the pandemic. They all have the loose
and still dress
waistline.
at
They're all
work.
cotton. I was going to say yes, but I am going to embarrass myself or anyone
Oh,
else.
sorry, I
Anyway,
said it.
absolutely the stress of just all that change. They didn't like being changed, so I still changed the diaper, but the clothes were already there. And they were fresh clothes. I always put on new clothes at the end of the night. And listen, as Vicky York said, your baby came to live with you, Wendy, not some other mom, not some other people. You have to be true to yourself. Otherwise, he's going to be confused. He's going to be looking around for Wendy. So if that means you take a break or you dress him at night or whatever you do, he's looking for you. And God, is that good advice? Because now that baby is a grown man, I'm so glad he could find me, right? That I was me. And that part of that is a me who, yeah, I put this on last night. It's my sleep shirt and it works really well in the day. So I guess it was just my own hack, but it was a great one for babies.
You still go to sleep in his clothes for tomorrow?
I'll have to ask him.
Okay.
All right, yeah. Follow up. We're gonna have to do a
Follow-up
follow-up episode.
hot question. We're gonna have him on the pod. Wendy, what is one way that you'll show yourself some radical love today? Don't get scared by radical now.
Radical is one of my favorite words. I think today is a beautiful day and I will be going outside. And also, since you asked, give myself some respite from thinking critically about myself. I'll do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I'll do that for you, Danny.
Okay, be gentle with yourself today. Emily has a favorite question she likes to ask people. It's a new question once we started talking about the flavored water at the conference last year.
How do you take your water? Bubbles, no bubbles, ice, no ice, flavor, no flavor, like
Citrus,
some
straight
mints in
up.
there. I don't know. What are you doing? What are you doing for your water?
Oh, I am a water fan. I live in Portland, Oregon, and we are really fortunate to have some really tasty water. And I've grown up with that. So water tastes sweet to me. I like cold water, I like hot water, but mostly I'll drink it cold. I like ice and I love carbonated water. So it's really interesting to me how important water is, how bad I feel when I'm not hydrated, and
Yeah.
especially while traveling or stressing out in general. So anyway, that I think I probably now drink more carbonated water just because I love that. But yeah, cold water, flavored or not. Great question.
All the water. I like it. I also want to ask housekeeping questions. So, like, when is the last day to register for the conference? If people are listening and they're like, ooh, got to do that.
Okay, our annual PSI conference and Climb Out of the Darkness in 2023 is the last week of June, going into the weekend of the 1st and 2nd in Kansas City, Missouri. And all are welcome. The early bird deadline is May 17th, so prices go up after that. If you're thinking at all that you're going to come, do it before May 17th. And after that, though, there's not really a deadline for registering because we have all the training materials are at the conference. It's a big hotel. There's plenty of room. And the Climb Out of the Darkness, of course, people can sign up 10 minutes before or just show up and say, Hi, I'm here.
Yeah.
So there's not really a deadline for that at all. And we're
So you
excited
could
about
wake
that.
up and go, I want to go to the conference and show up
Yeah.
as a walk in.
Yeah. You really could.
Wow. Okay.
It's always such an amazing gathering because it really does have all the different sections. It's not just psychotherapy and clinical stuff. There's also a track for peer support and community advocates and for just learning about all kinds of parts of how we get come together as community so that people feel better. As like we said before, it's not just physical or mental health or going to therapy. It's also what does it mean to get peer support? How do you get involved? I'm really excited about the conference.
It's a really fun place to connect with other super passionate perinatal mental health advocates and professionals all in one place.
In 2024, the PSI annual conference will be in Washington, D.C.
Ooh, mark your
Welcome
calendars.
to my neighborhood. Okay, I live in Maryland, but it's close enough, okay?
DMV.
Wendy, first of all, thank you for being the kind of supervisor, the kind of leader of this organization that allows, I think, all of us to feel like we can be our best selves and take big risks. Because a lot of this stuff that I carry around that I should let go of, but I'll get around to that, is about who I am not or how I'm not how I'm failing and what I'm not doing. And I never feel like that here. Everything feels like possibility. And I think that culture that you've created has allowed all of us to show up for other people who need to know that things are possible. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
So anyway, I think our job here is done.
Thank you so much for being part of that creative, nourishing, health promoting community because that is the real spirit of our recovery and how, like you said, it ripples out so that we want everyone to be able to just encounter one place, where it feels like, oh, I might I see myself or I can belong here. This is a safe space to step forward. And maybe that is the element from my own very perilous, but then really nourishing recovery is, oh my God, it's always comes back to that, doesn't it? And funny because that was my original specialty is creativity. And I think about the creative process of providing help and getting better all the time. So that training is also part of how I know that we're here to bloom. And also, I have to say, all my work in restaurants is really some of the best training I've had for doing this work. I just needed to say that shout out to everyone who's ever worked in a restaurant. And I think those skills are really important. And then the psychology and mental health is part. But Emily, just thank you for saying that. Emily and Danny, you are part of the spark, which is the flame on the campfire of Postpartum Support International. And I just adore you both so much.
Oh,
And I'm so glad for this podcast. And
thanks, Wendy.
Gianni, your beautiful voice. Also, here's the thing when you talk to many people and you ask how to stay in touch and they give you their website and their handle. The thing is that I don't have a website. I've never had a website. I've merged with PSI. When people ask me to introduce myself, I used to introduce Baby Blues Connection. Then, I introduce my kids. Now people ask me, and next thing I know, I'm just talking about PSI. And so my website is postpartum.net. I am always encouraging people to go there. My handle, though, on social media, it's public. I don't have a private social media, and I'm really happy to have people friend me. Don't be shy. On Instagram, I think it's Wendy N. DVS. I am also on Facebook, Wendy Newhouse Davis. And
That's how you appeared in my phone for a long time.
Yeah, if you follow Wendy on Instagram, she'll post some stories that'll make you smile.
Oh, yes. I do post some funny stories.
Yeah, it's just like something that'll make you smile,
I always just say, don't be shy to reach out to someone, especially me. I'm inviting you because people can always say no. So, in general, thank you both for this creative endeavor and for helping this introverted child continue in my journey to extrovert myself and to be communicating with so many people.
Oh, we're so glad that you joined us today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the I Am One podcast. Check out today's show notes where we'll drop links to all the important things that we mentioned in this episode. Please consider sharing about our show on social media and following and rating our show wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. It only takes a minute of your time and, well, that'll help with our collective mission of bringing resources and local support to folks worldwide. From everyone here at PSI, thanks again for listening.